All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Christopher Ledvina. I am the Assistant Director of Cooperative Partnerships here at Lakeland University. I am I am going to be your host today. I'll be turning it over very shortly to Kelly, but before I do, just want to quick tell everyone a couple updates. Number one, we do have 1 week left before our data analytics course will be getting started. That is predicting the future with data analytics. We've got some great speakers through Lakeland in that course. The Milwaukee Bucks are there. The um, Google will be there. A couple other companies, Prevea, will be represented to talk about how data analytics are used within their companies to create patterns and to understand where things are going in the future. So you can still sign up for that. If you're interested, by all means, shoot me an email or put a message in the chat and I can get you that information. Number two, we do have a new bonus presenter, you could say, who is scheduled for April 29th now. Carrie Nagel, an operations training and development manager from Schneider National, will be joining us to talk about how that company handles development on the of internal associates. So if you're interested in signing up for that presentation, I am more than happy to give you information about that as well. And finally, our last thing is that for this presentation, we do ask that you keep your videos off and your microphones muted during the presentation. Kelly will be asking you questions, and she will interact with you through chat and ask when for people to contribute by unmuting at that time. So by all means, do participate. But during the presentation portion, we do ask that you have your microphones off and as well as your videos. So without any further ado, I will turn it over now to Kelly Gonzalez, Talent Development Manager at Kohler Hospitality. Kelly, take it away.
Thanks, Christopher. It's great to get to see so many people here to talk about a topic that is really pretty much a passion for me. You may have read in my bio a little bit about me, but I want to just start there. So I've been in the learning and development and talent field for about 15 years now. Like many in this field, found my way here by accident and really just found a love for developing others. And along that love, I decided to get a master's. I do have a master's degree in training and development, a lot of the things that we're talking about today. I also happen to have 7 years of experience as a people leader. So again, this topic for me is really a passion, both from my career in talent management, but also as a people leader. On a personal level, I am married. I've got a really great husband, got 4 really great stepkids, 2 great pets, and I live in Manitowoc. So just like to share a little bit about myself as we get started. Today, my plan is to really talk about helping associates transition from an individual contributor to a manager by talking about 3 different stages. So the selection process, how we help them build skills before they get promoted, and then once they get promoted. So that's kind of our roadmap for today. I really want to start with this idea of talking about how we identify leadership potential, because more times than not, this is where I think we tend to go wrong in promoting people. I want to spend a few minutes talking about some of the risks of promoting the wrong person. So if you would go to your chat, share with me and with the group what you think some of these risks are of promoting someone who's maybe not right, or if you have some examples of where you've seen, what went wrong, please feel free to share those as well. Team dynamics, Christopher, for sure. culture change in the department. Yes, Katie, we're going to talk a lot about that transition from a buddy to a boss for sure. So I think you guys have hit on a lot of what I see going wrong. Yep, discouraging their direct reports, not giving them what they need, how they communicate online. I think you guys are really on to a lot of the things that I notice. So I think one of the biggest risks is if that person is put into a position that really isn't going to be a good fit for them, we're really setting them up to not be successful. And what that results in typically is a lack of engagement on their part, right? No one wants to feel like they can't be successful. And so that can just really create some poor emotion on that individual's part. But like some of you mentioned, it also really can create engagement issues for the team. And then ultimately, all of this can drive us to some really poor business results if we're setting people up in a position where they just can't be successful. So this is why I feel like focusing on who we're deciding to promote is just so critical in this process. I've seen a lot of different reasons why people get promoted. The most common is they're the best person at the job. So obviously they will be the best person to be the next successor, right? Um, might be because they've been there the longest. Sometimes it's because they are just really interested and they want it, or we're worried that they might leave. I actually have a personal story related to this. So in my last position before I came to Kohler, I joined the team and I was managing a group of instructional designers and fairly quickly identified that I was concerned that one of them was a flight risk, and she seemed to be giving me some signals that she was going to leave. I actually one day walking to a meeting caught her in a hallway, and she quickly like darted around the corner. She was on her cell phone, which just really gave me a vibe that she was looking to leave. So I went to my boss at the time and I said, "Hey, this is what I observed. Um, I'm a little concerned that this is what's happening and wanted to just talk with you about it." And at that time, my boss said, "Well, we actually were planning to promote her because she had actually asked about an opportunity to grow and wanted to take on this lead position." So I had been only in my position for probably about 2 months, but they said, this was in the cards. Like we were going to do this, excuse me, as part of her year-end review. So let's go ahead and let's just do it now. And this is probably I'm not a big, person who believes in regrets, but um, at that point I took the people who had been there at their word, and we made this decision to promote her into a lead role. So in that role, her job was really to help coach and mentor some of our younger um, instructional designers. She was there to be able to um, help us kind of set some of our standards and strategies. But I realized very quickly as we were talking about that role that she just wasn't someone who really like showed initiative in actually doing those things. So within her first month in that role, um, some of the people she was supposed to be doing some coaching with said, she can't really explain to me what I should do differently, and it just wasn't really working. And so the aha for me was I should have really taken the time to get to know her myself and really assess where she was and what she was going to need, and if that was really a right fit. I don't necessarily think that these the are wrong reasons to promote someone. I just think that they shouldn't be the only reason. We should really make sure that it's any of these things paired with things that give us indicators that that person really is fit for management and will do a good job as a manager. Using the raise hand feature, if you're familiar with that, I'd love to see a show of hands of how many people are familiar with a 9 box. Okay, looks like just a few of you. So this has become really a really common tool that's used to identify high potential talent and to make promotion decisions. I'm not going to go into too much detail around what the 9 box is because there's lots of collateral out there on this, and I can actually, Christopher, I'm going to send you with the slide deck at the end, as well as a couple of resources, and I'll send a couple links to some information about 9box. Um, the challenge that I often see with the 9box is that it's still not helping us be objective about hiring decisions. I've seen this go wrong where we believe someone to have potential, so I'm going to figure out how to get them in the high potential box. Um, Really, this should be a tool that's used embedded within the performance process. So what you're trying to do when you're looking at a 9box is you're looking at someone's current performance, and then also, do they have potential to be able to contribute at a higher level? And we're going to talk more about kind of how to really measure those things. Um, and like I said, lots of resources out there if you're interested in learning more about the 9box. This is something that can be used organization-wide, or it can also be used on sort of an individual level. And like I said, lots of free resources out there that you can go to look for samples. This is a tool that we do use here at Kohler. It's not this one specifically. Our model is a little bit proprietary, so that's why I can't show that to you. But we actually review this on a semi-annual basis. So every other year, we do what's called succession planning year, where we're measuring this in quite a bit of detail and then talking about a lot of the things that we're going to talk about through the rest of today's presentation. So I really believe that before you can actually measure someone's potential, you need to really understand and know what you're looking for. So I'm going to spend a little time now talking about how that looks to me and how I've done that in the past. So first, I want to start out by getting your thoughts. What makes an effective leader? What are some of those things that really make someone really good at being a leader? Go ahead and type in the chat. Being authentic. Absolutely. Transparency. So how clear are you with communication, empathy and trust, trust building, communication, absolutely, honesty, emotional intelligence, such a big one, right? You guys are hitting on exactly where I wanted you to go. So we all know that the things that make someone a good leader often have nothing to do with the technical skills of a job, right? And yet we're often looking at those technical skills to gauge whether we think someone has that potential to be a leader. What I would challenge you to think about is how do we measure the things that make them effective, right? So when we look at leadership skills, I put them into 2 buckets. There are skills that you're needed to lead people and skills that are needed to lead the business. Within each of those buckets, you have both technical skills and soft skills, right? So think of technical skills as processes, systems, things like that. But the soft skills are really some of those things that are a lot harder to teach and some of those things that just come inherent. A lot of the things that you guys mentioned in the chat, communication skills, emotional intelligence, those sorts of things. So instead of looking at, who does the best job at the technical role, I encourage leaders to really look at who has leadership potential from more of the soft skill side. So when we talk about leading people, it's the things you guys just said. A good communicator, a team player, someone who already kind of steps into a role of being able to coach others, who has that empathy, emotional intelligence, all those things that you guys said. And then the other side of that, on the lead the business side, someone who already kind of starts to see the big picture, who is able to make sound decisions and understand kind of all the aspects of a business decision. Someone who maybe thinks about going above and beyond, right? So if their job is X, they're maybe looking at how can I also add that little bit extra. Somebody who's innovative and coming to the table with ideas and not just, hey, I see a problem, but hey, I see a solution. Those are some of those things that ultimately would make someone potentially a good business leader. So one of the things I'm working on here with my team and my leaders in my businesses is a leadership capability model. And what this means to me is really breaking down in both of those categories, lead people and lead the business. What are the specific technical skills and soft skills that make them really be effective at that job, right? And this is really a trend in the talent development field. You may have heard the term competencies in the past, but really we're starting to frame it more as capabilities. What are those behaviors, skills that can really be demonstrated that ultimately make someone really capable and not just competent? And I'm really looking to break those down at different levels of leadership, right? Because what we would expect from a first level manager, we may not expect the same thing from a senior level manager, a director, an executive. So how can we kind of break that down? That's going to do a few different things. First of all, it's going to help us really as we measure where someone is at and what their potential is, but it's also going to help us with developing the skills they need to get there, right? So even just having this on paper helps us really create a career path for people. And you can do this this idea even at just an individual job level. It doesn't necessarily have to be at an organizational level. So once we've kind of measured where someone is, we've got an idea of their potential, and we know this is someone who we want to put on a track to get promoted. There are some things we can do to help them get ready. So this is not for a manager role, but I wanted to show you an example of how I've done this in the past. So this was actually for my instructional designers in my last role. I actually put together all those different capabilities for them. We had kind of a first level and then a second level, and then our lead in positions that they could be promoted to. So I put down all the different capabilities that were required for them to get to that next level. And then we really walked through, where is that person? What are the things we want to focus on actively developing? What are the things we feel like we're already proficient on, and where would we say we're an expert? And our goal to get them to promotion was to get proficient in every category. So that really kind of helped put on paper for them, what do I need to do to get there? And how can I do that, right? And it helped us really focus on those things that were most important. One of the things that I think is that I'll give as a caution, the one area where I see this being problematic sometimes is trying to take on and learn too much, right? Which then can prevent us and that associate from really being able to um, put that focus in and really develop that skill. So rather than picking all of these, we would pick, one or two at a time, and we're going to really focus on learning and growing in those particular areas. So this is where, when I'm working with leaders to determine potential for promotion in their areas, and when we're working on succession planning, this goes back to that capability model, right? So if we know exactly what are the specific capabilities that we expect from that first level manager, we can figure out then, what do we need to grow in this associate to be able to get them ready for that next thing? What do we need them to demonstrate so that we will know the time is right and we're really ready to move them into that next role? These often look like individual development plans. How many of you, go ahead and use the raise hand, how many of you are familiar with or use individual development plans today? Good. I see several of you. So again, individual development plans can be something that are organizational wide, or they can be something that are specific to a specific department or a specific role that you're trying to develop someone. Um, the types of things you're going to put on an individual development plan could be everything from actual formal learning opportunities, but also maybe stretch assignments, right? So how can we, when we think about especially things like asking someone to take on a project where they may have to do a little bit more of that decision making. One of the things I would often ask some of my team members to do to gauge their ability to get that big picture and really think through decision making is, bring me a proposal for your suggestion for how we would tackle a specific project, right? Because that's going to allow us to talk through and think through what are all those factors that you need to consider as a leader that you maybe don't have to consider when you're an individual contributor. You may decide to do some cross training with an individual employee. Maybe it's getting them involved in a mentorship where they're getting a chance to get coaching from someone who's not their direct leader. Of course, coaching is going to be a part of this from their leader and from anyone else that they're working with. One thing that I also think we don't do enough of is giving them that opportunity to be a coach. So putting them in situations where they can actually try their hand at a little bit of that leadership, even though it's, they don't have that formal leadership background. So whether that's pairing them with a more junior employee, or maybe even someone on a project who's outside of their department, but giving them the opportunity to see how they do at really helping coach another team member. And again, we're not going to do all of these things at one time. It's about picking what are the right things to help move the needle on the specific gap areas that we've identified for that person. They need to grow before we feel ready, that they're ready for that next step. I'm going to ask you to raise your hands again. How many of you are familiar with situational leadership? Okay, looks like just a couple of you. So situational leadership is a training program, a model that is used pretty commonly in terms of how to coach. So I haven't been paid by them at all to talk about this. It's just one that I really like, and I think it really fits well as we're talking about developing high potential employees. So the whole idea around situational leadership is that each person is at a specific development level for each task that they do, right? So someone who we're looking to promote on maybe the technical skills of the job could be in the very high performance area where they can they can do it on their own. They don't need really any support. Um, but when it comes to some of these newer skills that they're working to develop, they may be in this very initial category where they're not super comfortable, not super confident. They don't really know how to approach it. So they need a little bit more hand holding. So the situational leadership model basically says we shouldn't provide the same format of coaching or development to an employee on every task or every employee in the same way. Um, so I definitely recommend, again, this is one that you could go do a little reading about, take a little, dig in a little bit and learn a little bit about. Um, they do offer training classes that you can sign up for, that you can send people to. They have some online resources, but I think this is a model that I look at with managers who often have that promotion track within their teams, because I think it really helps them in thinking about how do I advance someone? How do I get someone ready? I think one of the reasons that we often have disengaged employees or people who, look to leave or seek another job is because they don't feel like they're given that opportunity to grow. And promotion isn't always the only way to grow, right? we can grow an employee until they're ready or until we have that position available. And I think the situational leadership model really is a great tool to help us kind of put that hat on and think about how do we best help someone feel like they're developing, even if they're staying in their position for a little while. Okay, so now we have got someone, we're promoting them, and I want to spend some time, the last part of our time together, talking about how we really get them ready. This is, again, where I think in many cases we fail new leaders. In my opinion, in many cases, we kind of just throw them to the wolves and we just don't really do as much as we could do to really help them get started. So I want to spend some time talking about some of the things that I've done and seen and some ideas that you can take back to think about how to really help them get their feet under them and get started in a really positive way. It's really about setting them up for success as a leader. Someone mentioned this in the chat, but helping someone move from peer to leader is really important, right? So how do we help them have the right conversation? It's often really awkward. And sometimes it really helps to just call that out and talk about it in a really transparent way. Um, and that'll help them kind of get over that hurdle. But they may need help, they may need prompting to do it, and they may need someone to really lean on and help them kind of think through the right approach. Another way I see new leaders often go wrong is they've been sitting back and they've been watching and they've been that individual contributor and they have so many ideas of how to do things differently. And I really try to encourage new leaders to not try to make too much change right away, because that ultimately can make your team feel really disengaged. It can make them feel like just, in shock and awe of everything that's happening, and it can be really unsettling. So rather than trying to make too much change all at once, how can they just step in, maybe let things go with the status quo for a while, and then introduce ideas over time? They are going to have to set or reframe sometimes their boundaries. And so helping them have those conversations and helping them think through how to do that is really, really important. Um, I had someone recently, a manager that I was talking through, who shared with me a little bit of her experience because she was like her peers were her friends. They spent so much time together outside of work. They were the people that she would vent to in the past, and now she was their boss, and that was really challenging for her. And so she, had to tackle that head on and had to really set some very specific boundaries with those people to say, I still care about you as a person, but we have to kind of reframe our relationship. And that can be really hard. And I think we shouldn't underestimate how difficult that can be. One of the other ways that I see that we can help someone in that position is helping make sure they have everything they need to establish a new peer network, right? Everybody wants that person that they can call and vent to, or that person that they can call and run an idea by, and that can't be their team anymore, right? So they need someone who can be that safe space. So the more we can do to help a new leader get introduced to their peers and really build that network as quickly as possible, I think is really, really valuable to their success and their engagement and how they feel about their role. So there are two different things I'm going to talk about. One is skill development, but the other is really what we refer to here at Kohler as integration. So how do we make sure they know all their new systems, right? So in the past, they may have used a timekeeping system because they had to enter their time or submit their PTO, but now they've got new responsibilities, right? So making sure they're up to speed on all those systems and processes, and then making sure they really understand what their goals and objectives are as a new leader. So that's what I think of as integration, right? How do we get them feeling comfortable in the mechanics of their role? But then there's also this idea of skill development, right? So how do we help them become a people leader? I really believe that we could all do a better job at giving new people leaders training right out the gate so that they've got a venue to start to really learn some of those people leader skills in a concrete way. Um, I believe in prioritizing them, so focusing on the most critical skills first, and also giving them time to digest and really think about how to apply everything that they're learning um, within the scope of that. Um, and I believe that any training that we do for a people leader should be complemented with coaching, right? So their manager and or a mentor really needs to be hands-on with them as they're going through this training to be able to be a sounding board as they're talking through specific, as they're working through applying this and trying to see how it goes. They need somewhere to get feedback. They need somewhere to get coaching, right? So making sure that they've got that, someone there to support them with reinforcing what they're learning, or it really will fall flat. Want to share, so this is actually an initiative that I have been working on in my role. And so I wanted to share a little bit about what our program looks like and how we're doing this. So we have a new supervisor program. This is really intended to be for our frontline supervisors. So the people who get promoted to manage our direct frontline associates. And for us, it's a 4-part series. Within each part, they have a pre-work component. So that could be e-learning, it could be videos, it could be articles. And then it almost always involves some sort of reflection, right? So I'm asking them to really reflect and do some preparation so that they can come to the workshop ready to talk about specific situations that they're facing back on the job. So then our workshop component is really focused on let's talk through specific scenarios. Let's talk through a case study example. Case studies can be a really great way to apply these concepts in a safe space where it feels like lower stakes, right? Because it's not their real life. But then I think a big component for this is that chance to bring things that they're really dealing with and to workshop them as a group and learn from each other, learn from me as their facilitator, but really have that chance to let me think through how I'm going to take this and I'm going to apply it on my job. That to me is one of the most important things as we talk about leader development that will really make that become part of what they actually do instead of just information that was interesting and nice to have. And then I always leave them with an assignment, so to speak. And their assignment really is to go take the skill that we've learned and apply it, practice it for the next, 3 to 4 weeks in between our sessions and see how that goes, right? So we're going to talk about that at the next session, but also I'm asking their manager to follow up and we'll talk about that a little bit more too. The topics that we focus on. So for us, with that idea of really thinking through what's the most critical, we really have focused on some of those specific people leader soft skills. So we kind of run through the employee cycle. So we talk about hiring and onboarding. Our next session is really around how to set clear expectations, how to provide feedback, and how to coach. We talk about both coaching someone who is struggling and someone who is maybe thriving in their role and is on that potential promotion track. Then we talk about if feedback isn't working and we've got maybe something bigger that surfaces, how do we frame and have that difficult conversation? That includes talking about write-ups, that talks about how to have a termination conversation. And then finally, we wrap up with talking about how to motivate your team, how to focus on engagement, and really how to build team culture. Um, these for us, as we look at our engagement scores, these are the things that we see coming back time and time again, where we know we could do a better job. And so that's why we've chosen to focus on these particular skills for this program. So this is just an example of one of the topics. So difficult conversations. I actually just facilitated this with our pilot group a couple weeks ago. So it's very fresh for me. So we actually found a LinkedIn learning course that does a really good job of talking about the do's and don'ts when having a difficult conversation. And it gives actually almost like a recipe, right? Or a framework of here's how to structure that conversation. So I asked them to watch that e-learning course and then reflect on a previous difficult conversation. I think that moment allows them to really stop and think about why didn't it go well and what could I have done better, which will help them do better that next time. And then they were tasked to come with one specific conversation that they need to have. So in our workshop, we spent the entire time working through the model that was provided in that e-learning and having them actually prepare to have that difficult conversation, right? So we actually scripted it out. We shared with our peers and had everybody kind of contribute to feedback to be able to help that person really polish and prepare to be able to go have that difficult conversation. And then they were tasked to actually go have the conversation. And this is where I think the value of what we're doing in the program really hinges also on that person's manager. So they're also asked then to, after they've had the conversation, discuss with their manager, how did it go, and get some coaching, right? So um, I can't say enough about how important the manager's involvement is in the success of training for a new manager. Um, we actually, in order to make sure that this is really working the way we need it to, we actually have a prep session for managers who are going to have a new supervisor going through the program. We walk them through, remind them of the contents of the program, the expectations. Then each session after we finish, I send the manager a toolkit. So it's got specific talking points, it's got those action items that we asked the class to go and take and practice. And then we give them some tips on coaching. So we're really tasking that manager with following up, asking their supervisor, how did your session go last week? What did you learn? How are you going to apply it? And then once they've tried it, really talk about how did it go? What went well? What do you wish had gone differently? How can I help support you? Right? Because we can, we can train all we want, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually going to apply it. So it really is up to the manager to make sure that the people who go through our program are actually going back and applying and using what they learned and that it's working out for them. Not everybody may have, a training department who can build this custom training. So I wanted to also just share a little bit of what some of those different resources are as you think about how to develop new managers. LinkedIn Learning has really just a ton of different leader training sessions available, and that can be really good. If you don't have the budget for LinkedIn Learning, YouTube, has actually a ton as well. So you can go just Google any manager skill, or look it up on YouTube, and you'll find someone has put some training out there that you could leverage with your new managers. If you do have some budget, and you don't want to, build a program in-house, but you want to be able to send people to training as a new manager, both Franklin Covey and Ken Blanchard have training for new managers that works really well. Franklin Covey is probably a little bit higher cost than Ken Blanchard. So Ken Blanchard actually does the situational leadership model that I shared with you earlier. And their organization also does a new manager program called the 1 Minute Manager, which is really nice as well. A really, really low budget way to be able to offer some support to new managers is a technique I like to call leader roundtables. This really becomes a sort of scalable way to do mentorship also. So it can be an HR or talent professional leading them, or you pick a really strong leader from the organization and set them up with a cohort. Um, in my opinion, it's really helpful to keep that group fairly small because you want them to have that the most ability to engage within that session. So maybe it's 5 for your organization, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 2. What that's going to look like is going to be different to you, but there are also a couple different ways to structure it. So I've done it and seen it before where we pick sort of a topic of the month, right? So maybe today we're going to talk about feedback, and I would share out a YouTube video, a LinkedIn Learning, an article, and everybody just kind of watches the same thing. And then let's come back and let's talk about what does this really look like on the job? What experiences have we had? What are we struggling with? And we just really sit and talk with each other and workshop through situations that they're dealing with. Um, Another avenue, if you don't want to have that kind of topic of the month, is to just ask, your participants in the roundtable to bring a situation that they're dealing with, and let's, just talk through what are some ideas that the group has for how to handle that. What would they do? What would the senior leader recommend, right? So it's just kind of that really in the moment coaching. Um, for someone, but sometimes it's a little easier to be vulnerable when it's not your manager that you have to bring something to, right? So if a new leader is, let's say, struggling um, with performance for a specific employee, and but maybe they want to be able to handle it themselves and they don't want to have to take it to their leader and raise flags. um, this can be a really nice way for them to be able to like get a sounding board and really ask for help in a venue that feels sometimes more comfortable for them. One thing also, so just in wrapping up, one thing that I feel really, really passionately about is that leadership shouldn't be the only way to grow your career, right? Not everyone is going to be the right fit for a leader role. Not everyone even wants to take on a leadership role, but that doesn't mean that everyone shouldn't deserve to grow, right? The only way to be high potential shouldn't be to have those strong leadership capabilities. And so this is something where I feel like in, in our industry as a whole, for a long time, the only path up was through leadership. I think we're starting to see now some recognition that you need to be able to find a way for people to grow, even if they don't want to be a leader. So a previous company that I worked for actually was starting to really focus this idea. So they were looking at, when they determined potential, they were looking at 2 different tracks. One is a leader track and one is more of an expertise track. So how this often looks is it can look like leveled positions. So like I said, with my instructional design team, wanted to be able to give them that career path. So we really looked at what do we look at in leveling those positions and what does it mean to be at each of those levels? I mean, of course, people care about pay, but they care about more as well. So like, how do we allow them to take on additional responsibility, take on new challenges, and really feel like they're developing that expertise and adding a different level of value? Um, this also, again, could look like opportunities to find a way to specialize more deeply in the specific topic that they care so much about and that they've invested so much knowledge into. I'm going to open it up at this point for any questions from the group, but also wanted to just share my contact information in case anyone wants to pick my brain on anything or, keep the conversation going. But at this point, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take those. No one has questions. Like I said, I'm going to share with Christopher the slide deck and a few of those resources that I think people will find interesting so that you have a little bit of a path forward. Hopefully, I've given you a little food for thought of how you can take this back to your organization. I really believe that all of this are things that can that you can do in one way or another. Yes, so Stacy, great question on identifying the new leader capabilities and competencies. That is it's a hard nut to crack, and you're right, it could be really big. So the way I've often approached that is there are capability and competency models that you can pull from, and then there's an exercise you can do called a card sort where you're putting them in front of your leaders and having them basically prioritize them. And I'll look to find a resource that talks about that process that I can include for you as well.
All right. Last chance. Any final comments, questions? All right. Thank you, Kelly, for joining us today. A lot of great information. I appreciate that. And thank you, everyone else, for joining us. It's great to see all of the different people interacting in the conversation. Um, I hope you will continue to join us. Once again, I will quick plug April 29th. We do have Carrie Nagel, an operations training and development manager from Schneider, who will be joining us. If you did not sign up for that one, by all means, shoot me a message and I can get that out to you as well. But once again, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And with that, I will sign off. Have a good rest of your day.